Okay, it's preparing. Okay, we got this here and got this here.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so I just want to make an announcement that this meeting is being recorded, so anything that needs to be foiled can be foiled, and anything in the chat will be foiled. So take it away, Barbara and Susan, and Jeff.
Sue and Susan. Let's not forget my Susan.
Aye.
Okay, so is Marty here?
Yes, Marty's here, and Army Corps of Engineers are here too.
Okay, great. Okay, so it is my great pleasure to introduce the Brooklyn Borough President of Parks, Marty Moore. Marty, tell us what you got.
Nothing.
I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I don't have an awful lot. As you know, we were given, I think it's $105 million for a phase one of the boardwalk, where we have engaged a consultant to do a technical study for our parks designers and engineers. That study just started in the fall. It's going to look at conditions and modeling and engineering and things like that. So that there's nothing really to report right now. Of course, when there is and our designers, produce something for a phase one and what our concepts are, we will of course report back to the community board. But it's way too early for that at this point. We are aware of the HAG study with our partners at the Army Corps of Engineers. I think they'll agree that things take a long time to get authorization funding. I'm not going to speak for them. Naturally, whatever we do in the future at Coney Island, not only will we engage with the Corps, but we're required to, as well as DEC. So that's really all I have, unless there's specific questions. I don't have an awful lot to report. It's kind of early in the game on this whole thing.
Marty, would you explain to everybody what phase one is supposed to be doing so they understand where we are?
We don't know. Obviously, $105 million sounds like a lot. Part of the study will be to do a cost out of what the entire boardwalk and buildings and structures and stuff will cost. So we don't know what phase one means right now. It'll be some portion, but we don't know what or how, because that's why the study is happening. So like I said, it's very early in the game. We don't have anything to report at this time.
Okay, Marty, due to the condition of the boardwalk and and is there a way to push this? Is there a way to make it faster so we can get something done now? Because I know what the Army Corps may do is in the future, but I'm worried about now. Is there anything we could do now in this phase one?
No, not capitally speaking, but we do. The mayor funded additional carpenters last year. We have them starting again, I believe, in April. So we'll have 4 teams out there doing what they can. We're in the midst of procuring acceptable lumber that can be used for the boardwalk. As you know, we can't use tropical hardwood. So that's sort of the interim work, and that there's a capital project for the small section from 24th to 27th. But no, there's nothing we could do to expedite it quicker. We are fully aware that the boardwalk is 100 years old this year. We are very aware of the condition of it, and we want this to happen just as badly as everyone else. But there is much study and analysis to be done first.
Excuse me, Marty, do you have any plans to have a party for the boardwalk for its birthday? I know we had one at 85.
I think at the beach opening, we will do, we will mention it in the comments. I don't know if party is the right, I don't know that the boardwalk can handle a party right now, but we will, of course, mention that at the beach opening.
Okay. Before we continue with questions and answer, Jeff wanted to say something because he's also part of this joint committee meeting. Jeff?
Thank you, Eddie. I just want to welcome everybody who's on the Environmental Committee for joining us tonight. It's a joint committee between Parks and Environmental. And I'm glad that the Army Corps is here and the Parks Department is here so that we can all work from the bottom up and not from the top down on this meeting. And we will have some presentations from the Army Corps and from some other person named Ida. And we will go over this intelligently and very respectfully. Thank you.
Okay, so Craig, you're next, and then Joanne.
Excuse me 1 second, Eddie.
Okay.
There were hands. I can't see all hands if you'll help
Yeah.
me. But I just wanted to ask if my co-chair Susan would like to do something before we
yes.
begin.
Susan, there you go.
I really just want to welcome everybody, and I guess I just want to reiterate what the commissioner said is that this is very early in the process, so we'll see what develops.
Okay, cool. All right, so we got Craig, and then we got Joanne.
Thank you, Eddie. Good evening, everyone. Marty, we had at least 2 smaller projects that seem to be design ready and moving ahead. The West 24th to West 27th Street plywood section that would be replaced with recycled plastic lumber that you presented to the community board, and also the Poseidon Park building and the vehicular on-ramp that would be constructed at West 27th Street. What is the status of those projects? Last I heard from you, they had to go to the Landmarks Preservation Commission and I guess the Public Design Commission. Can you tell us where we're at with those?
I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but both projects are proceeding.
Okay, so no guess as to when that's going to go to the other agencies for review?
I manage about I don't know 300 or so projects, so I don't have that in front of me now. Eddie, you can give me a call tomorrow, and I can find out what the status.
Okay, because you knew that
board,
this was the meeting to talk about the boardwalk, right?
The board gets an update on all the capital projects twice a year. So Eddie, do you have that handy?
I don't have a handy. I'm at home right now. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so we knew that this was a meeting to talk about the boardwalk, and there are only 3 projects on the boardwalk. I'm surprised that we don't have an update from the Parks Department on what's going on with them.
Okay, so we can find out for tomorrow. Call the office and we can see what we have. Okay. All right.
They're on
Joanne?
schedule. There's nothing changed on them. They're on schedule. I just don't have that timeline in front of me.
Okay. All right. Joanne first, and then Jeff and Ida, or Ida and Jeff.
You know what? I'm a little bit confused as to why we're having this meeting in the first place if they have nothing to report to us.
Well, we also have to hear what the Army Corps of Engineer has to say. So
well, that's all well and good, but right now our problem is the boardwalk. And is there any way that we can repurpose the capital funding immediately into an emergency in-kind repair so that our boardwalk doesn't fall down while we're waiting for the powers to decide what they're doing? Meanwhile, our boardwalk is falling down around us. So isn't there any way to get some emergency funding in to do it immediately and not wait till maybe next week, next month, next year, 2 years from now? This is ludicrous and a waste of our time. Thank you.
okay.
I guess there's no way to move the money, right? And to get it working.
There is. We'll just tell you that there is not.
Yes. Thank you.
No one has declared an emergency. We realize that we need to do this and do this correctly. We don't want to make a makeshift work of this. We've engaged the consultant to give us their best recommendations. That was expedited and that's happening, but there's no quick way of doing this now.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Ida?
No, it's Jeff.
Was it Jeff? Okay, yeah,
Okay.
you guys switch yourself.
I'm speaking to Commissioner Marty Marr now. I'm reading a report from the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, on what they call heat islands and the impacts of heat islands. And if this project goes through that you want to do with concrete over plastic, it's going to create, okay, that's going to create a 2.5 mile heat island. Some of the impacts, and I can't go into it that much because I don't want to take up everybody's time, but it increases energy consumption. It elevates emissions of air pollutants and greenhouse gases. It compromises human health and comfort, and it impairs water quality. Have you done any studies on the impacts of heat islands with the materials that you are going to be using? Thank you.
Jeff, we do not know how we're doing the 2.4 miles of the boardwalk at this time. That's why we have the consultant on board. The only part we're doing next with RPL on concrete is the 2 block from 24th to 27th Street that we discussed half a year or a year ago.
But will
Okay.
you be doing a study, I'm asking you, on the heat impacts on these types of materials?
Our planning division is handling the consultant. I will pass that on to them to pass on to the consultant. Not to my knowledge, they're looking at structural and engineering and existing conditions, but I'll pass that on.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have is Abby.
Hi, Eddie. Thank you so much for calling on me. Sorry, I can't turn my camera on.
That's okay.
I did have a question for the commissioner, specifically as a concerned community member. How did the boardwalk end up so disjointed? How, like, what had to happen for Oceana and the high rises at the end at Seagate to get the mixed wood, mixed plastic ply? Didn't get that.
Great.
Like, I just
No,
wanted to ask exactly how that happened. There's so many different boardwalk, different types of materials.
So, again, I've been doing this a long time. There was a time where every year we had $1 million for capital work. That was back in the 80s and 90s. That didn't happen in the 2000s. We got, in my memory, we got 10 million from the state that paid for the section from Coney Island Avenue to Brighton 15th Street. We got 15 million in federal and 5 million in local. That paid for the areas at Ocean Parkway and West 37th Street. And the local money, as I recall, was between 10th Street and Stillwell, or maybe the 16th Street. So those were all those were the worst sections at that time that we addressed, and we addressed it with what the engineers recommended. I remember being in Coney Island Hospital 10 or 15 years ago, talking about a pilot with this board, and we agreed to proceed, and those were the things that we did at those times.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And then the follow-up question is, why is plywood on the section of the boardwalk in front of the houses in the 20s?
When Sandy happened in 2012, that section was already in bad condition. When FEMA and the mayor came down and looked, it wasn't the FEMA only paid for things that got destroyed as a result. So what they did was they sort of cannibalized the area to keep it open and use boards from one side to open the other side. To get it as quickly as possible to open, we put plywood down for that summer on half of it, That plywood doesn't last very well in those conditions. We replaced it several years later with marine grade plywood. That didn't last very long. And I want to say 2 years ago, we did the same thing again, and then we put textured paint over it for skid resistance. That was stuff done with expense funds with our carpenters while waiting for FEMA funds. I'm sorry, not FEMA funds, for design funds for the project that we talked about last year that is happening. So those were interim measures that we were able to affect at that time.
Okay, all right. So we have 2 more people speaking because we have another speaker to talk about the Army Corps of Engineer project. So the next 2 are Minnie and then Craig. Minnie?
Yes, I'd like to say that section on West 25th Street with the plywood, even though you treated it, it's extremely slippery, especially for people who are walking and jogging in that area. If it rains, it's very, very hazardous. And I'd also like to say there's an alcove on the boardwalk near the aquarium, and it says that the wood in that alcove has been sustainably harvested in Guatemala. So there should be sources of sustainably harvested wood that we could use on the boardwalk. I'd also like to say that putting down plastic, there's a huge issue with microplastic now. It's getting in the oceans, it's getting in food, it's becoming a really serious health hazard. And it just seems like this might be contributing to that if we continue to put down forms of plastic. And I'd also like to add, I thought that we were getting money, that Hakeem Jeffries was able to get us money from the infrastructure fund so that we'd have some more money for the boardwalk. I think those are my questions so far. Thank you.
So as I said, I don't know if you need me to answer. As I said, we do not have a plan for the entire boardwalk or what material is going to be used. I'm unaware of any federal funding that's come, but I would like to see some because I think we need considerably more than what we have.
All right, Craig, Charlie, all right, Craig, go ahead.
Thank you. So Marty, thinking about this investment in the boardwalk, it occurs to me as a taxpayer how frustrating it is that the city of New York is going to be spending any money at all on the boardwalk because the Parks Department has sort of locked us into a cycle of destruction by refusing to stop driving on the boardwalk and by removing the drainage from underneath the deck and funding the maintenance from year after year. We're basically building up a backlog of work that has to be done on that boardwalk. And unless the Parks Department stops driving on the boardwalk, properly funds a maintenance budget, and restores drainage underneath the deck, we're going to be locked into this cycle of destruction. So what can you do to help us break that cycle?
I believe that the study that we're doing for our engineers to inform them of the best way to proceed is the smartest way to go. We do need to look at this holistically, and we want it, of course, to last for another 100 years. I've been here for 38 years. We've greatly reduced the number and weight of vehicles that are on the boardwalk. To maintain a park safe and in clean requires vehicles to be on the boardwalk, both DOT, police department, park enforcement, and maintenance. That's always been the case. They've been there, but like I said, we've reduced the size and weight of vehicles over that time. I think the drainage you're talking about are we talking about the water drainage or the sand drainage?
We're talking about the water drainage. It's trapped because the sand comes all the way up to the space between the planks. And so now we have wood planks that sit in wet sand, which causes warping and the growth of vegetation between the planks. That was not what the Army Corps did when they raised the beach elevation in the mid-90s. They left a gap there for drainage. But my understanding is that complaints by Senator Kruger and others in the community about homeless hanging out in those gaps caused the Parks Department to fill in those gaps without doing an EIS, without doing a study, and now 20 years later, having caused a great deal of damage to the wooden planks.
Yeah, I disagree with what you're saying. Since the Corps of Engineer project, that there has been much sand migration. It does exacerbate the wood, and it does cause the weeds and all the other things. We've been combating that since the Corps of Engineer project, which is why I think the engineering study that we're undertaking, we'll look at all of that stuff.
Okay, real quick, I mean,
Hey, I'd like
Charlie,
to ask Marty
Charlie?
a question.
no,
I'd like to ask Marty a question, something that has to do with the tennis courts, because I don't.
no, Fran, we're not talking about the tennis courts right now. This is just about the boardwalk, okay? I'm sorry. All right, Charlie, real quick, because we're
Real quick, just a message, let everyone know that the Coney Island History Project will be doing an exhibit about the boardwalk covering 100 years and past, present, and future. And we plan to open this exhibit on Memorial Day and hope everyone can come.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right. Next, Rob, real quick, because we're going to be behind with the Army Corps.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I wanted to make 2 points. One is to answer a question that somebody previously asked, which I don't think was fully answered, and that is the reason that there's a hodgepodge of sections with different materials is that throughout the decades, past few decades, there's been no comprehensive plan, obviously. And the excuse that was used each time, and I call it an excuse, was we're going to do a test section. Well, now you're saying there's studies being done to have a comprehensive plan. That's really nice, but that's the reason for the person who asked this question, why all these different materials in different sections. So that being said, I want to emphasize my second point, which is somebody also mentioned something that I've been speaking about for years, that there should be real consideration, not saying to us, Marty, that the city has a policy of not using rainforest wood. As was pointed out, rainforest wood has been used on the boardwalk by the people who manage the aquarium. Furthermore, we're not talking about using rainforest wood. There's a distinct difference between rainforest wood and sustainably sourced rainforest wood, and I've made these points over and over. That benefits not only us in its use, but the local communities from which it comes, because it incentivizes them to not clear cut the rainforest. And in fact, the largest rainforest protection organization, the Rainforest Alliance, has come up with the standard that has to be met for something to be called sustainably sourced. So I would ask you, Marty, why do you keep insisting that the city has this policy? There's no law against using sustainable rainforest wood.
Robert, I've been doing this a long time. We have to purchase wood for the boardwalk. We are not allowed to purchase any tropical hardwood whatsoever. And we are limited in what we are able to purchase. And it's very irksome to do, because they're not the amounts that we need in many different woods. I'm sorry that you disagree with us.
Okay. All right, we got to go to the next speaker, because right now we're short of time. I'm sorry, Ida and Jeff, because we're going to go to the next one, and if you want to refer to it, that's fine. Bryce and Danielle, you guys got the controls now to show your presentation.
Thank you, Eddie. So let me just pull up my screen here. So I have a fairly short slide deck. It's kind of focused on the Community Board 13 area. Can everybody see my screen all right?
Yes.
Good. So just to give a little bit of background on the New York and New Jersey Harbor and Tributaries Coastal Storm Risk Management feasibility study that the Corps is doing. It got started in 2016. It's sponsored by the two states working through DEC in New York and DEP in New Jersey. It's also being done in full partnership with New York City through the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, who are on the phone tonight. It was one of 9 focus areas because this area shown there on the graphic on the left had not been comprehensively evaluated by the Corps for coastal flood risk, even though we have several projects within the study area to address coastal storm risk. We had never evaluated it comprehensively. And then following Hurricane Sandy, of course, there have been a number of additional projects, which I'll get into a little bit when I talk about our future without project condition or alternative one, as we describe it. The study was started in 2016, but it did get stopped in 2020 and 2021 for lack of funding, but it has been fully funded at 100% federal expense. Previously, it was 50-50 cost shared with the 2 states. But it has been fully funded under its current scope for completion. So the comment review that we have, the draft report that we released in late September is on our website. The link is there at the bottom. And just earlier this week, we extended the comment closing date from yesterday to the end of this month, March 31st. So a little bit more time for folks to take a look at the report if they want to and send us whatever comments that they might have. We would greatly appreciate any feedback by anybody on the report, the plans that we have, just everything. So the study right now is proved to be completed in 2024, but with the extended public outreach and a few other reasons that might get pushed to more the end of 2024. But that's the end of the study phase. And then the Corps has a design phase, which we assume will be because of the scope of the study and the alternatives that we're talking about, several years. We have 6 years assumed right now. And then construction would follow after that. So it's the plans that we have are very preliminary, very conceptual, and the frameworks, there's a lot of details left to be worked out. But just to provide what information we do have, the report and all the appendices all told are about 4,000 pages. It's on our website. Again, that's the link there shown in the highlight. I encourage anyone that wants to take a look to start with the reader's guide. And then the story map is also a useful tool, that first link that you see there on the left-hand side. It's a GIS-based interactive platform where you can kind of zoom in on each of the features and each of the different plans. It has some animations. It's a lot more user-friendly in that regard. The reader's guide is good in the sense that it gives short descriptions of what each of the chapters of the report, as well as all the appendices, what they speak to. So it kind of helps guide you to whatever appendix or whatever topic of interest you might have. The alternatives that we have, there are pros and cons with each one. And so if you like one or you don't like one, please let us know. It's totally understandable. Alternative one, like I said, is the no action alternative. But the 5 with project alternatives, alternatives 2 through alternative 5, basically span the spectrum from very large in-water measures at one end of the spectrum to just land-based measures at the other. And the coverage that they have, the cost, the time period, the impacts, other considerations are just really quite different between them all, but they kind of start at the ocean and then kind of work further into the estuary as you go through the alternatives. Alternative 3B is our tentatively selected plan, and the alternatives that have storm surge barriers is some component, given how many tidal straits, creeks, embayments, tributaries there are in the estuary, kind of calls out for storm surge barriers at some locations. And there those 4 alternatives, alternatives 2 through 4 that have storm surge barriers. Alternative 3B had a good mix of those, as well as shoreline-based only measures. And it had the least amount of induced flooding of all those alternatives that did have storm surge barriers. So it kind of, from our perspective, we see it kind of as a sweet spot, at least for starting a discussion as to how we best improve coastal storm risk management in the region, because one of the bottom lines of our study throughout has been that there's a lot of risk left, even for all the other projects that have and are being put in place. There's a lot left to be done. So climate change and sea level rise are only going to make that worse in the future. So it's best to kind of plan for these things and do what we can now. So in that vein, we see the implementation of whatever gets advanced as kind of being in phased and implementation, with the less complex features being done quickest and first, and then the more complex features taking a little longer to evaluate and do the engineering work for. More in the midterm, and then we will make sure that whatever we put in place can be adapted in the longer term future for climate change and sea level rise as needed, just because there's so much uncertainty in that. We also see the implementation being kind of layered in how we approach it in different areas. So that's kind of the overall description of the alternatives. I won't go into great details on the others, but just kind of focus on alternative 3B and then the features that are there in South Brooklyn and just Community Board 13 area. So the without project condition, basically we've been looking primarily, not altogether, but just primarily so far in the study at a more severe coastal storm impact to the region. And with that, we've been looking at the 1% flood event with the intermediate sea level rise added to it, which is that purple area shaded on the graphic on the left. That's a fairly severe storm, and it's primarily from storm surge, which has by far the biggest life safety threat in the study area. But there are other flood risks, of course, rainfall that we saw with Hurricane Ida and then prior storms with Irene and Floyd and such. And then also, other water, resource issues, wave action in some areas and things. Obviously, Coney Island area. But the current focus has been largely on that severe storm event. As we go forward in the study, we'll be looking at different storm events. We'll also be looking at trying to optimize on that 1% flood event to see if we get a bigger bang for the buck, greater net benefits by building it for like the 200-year event or the 500-year event, or maybe even a lesser year event. Another key consideration in the without project condition is in that graphic on the upper right that basically shows some of the larger scale projects that have been put in place or are being put in place to address coastal storm risk. And the importance of capturing those in the without project condition is just so we don't get a double counting of benefits. The benefits that those projects are meant to address, we don't want to count as part of the features, the benefits of the features that we have in our plan. So in addition to those that you see on that graphic, there's literally dozens, if not hundreds of additional measures that have been put in place to improve resiliency and coastal storm risk in the study area following Hurricane Sandy on, local critical infrastructure in some locations or very localized projects. So, but those are the kind of the bigger scale projects. And then on the bottom right is the factor of greatest uncertainty, and particularly in the longer term futures, sea level rise. That's the projection at the battery. The Corps' projections are high, intermediate, and low are the white, gray, and black lines respectively. The colored dots are the two states and the city's projections over that same time period. You can see with the high projection, it gets increasingly concerning. The actual data is hard to see it on this graphic, but it's actually shown there on the 1992 to 2022 time period, a little magenta line. Depending on how you develop a trend line off of that measured sea level at the battery, we've been tracking either on the intermediate to the high projection. So it's for that reason we've been using the intermediate in our analysis, but going forward, we'll be looking at all three projections just to make sure we have bracketed kind of the range of what could occur in the future. Now, our economics is focused on the 50 years after the construction ends from what we define as our base year, but we anticipate that whatever's put in place will be there effectively permanently. So for that reason, we do have a planning horizon, and we do look at the broader, longer term impacts and how these features or components that we might put in place might need to be adapted over that time period. A lot of work left to be done on that, though. Looking at the 5 alternatives kind of on an economic and a more macro scale. Alternative 2 has a large barrier at Sandy Hook to Breezy Point with tie-ins, as well as a barrier on the Throgs Neck. So it covers a pretty broad percentage of the area, which is a pro for that alternative. But it does have a huge time period for construction and a large cost, and that counts fairly severely against it with over 3 decades of construction time. So that alternative from our analysis is actually infeasible. Whereas the other alternatives have a benefit cost ratio, as you can see in that far right column, of about 2 to 2.5. The alternative that generates the greatest bang for the buck, or the greatest net benefits as we describe it, is alternative 3B there in the middle. And it has a 63% of the area addressed. And of the remaining 37%, there's actually a number of other projects that cover that remaining balance. So it dovetails nicely with those other projects that are being put in place and does provide pretty good coverage for all of the high-risk areas within the study area. It has a 14-year construction duration and a first cost of $52.7 billion. So it's with that combined with the least amount of induced flooding impacts, and a few other considerations that kind of stands out in our analysis. Just go in a little bit of detail on it. I won't spend too much time on it, but just so everybody understands, it covers the whole study area, particularly the more vulnerable areas you can see shaded here in green. There's a large feature on the backside of Staten Island and the inner areas of New Jersey with the storm surge gate on the Arthur Kill and the Kill Van Cole. There's 3 shoreline-only based measures in Jersey City that ties off to another project that New Jersey DEP is doing downtown Manhattan, tying off to a project that New York City is doing, East Harlem, 3 storm surge gates in the smaller creeks in Brooklyn and Queens on Gowanus, Newtown, and Flushing Creek, and then the large feature that we have in South Brooklyn and Queens encompassing Jamaica Bay, which I'll be speaking on in greater detail here. Basically building off the studies that we've done in the past that have all kind of come to that kind of a solution. You'll notice that Breezy Point is included in that, and that's as a induced flooding mitigation feature. There is some induced flooding impacts in this alternative. It's the least amount of all the alternatives that have storm surge gates, but there is some induced flooding impacts in Breezy Point and along the East River at Kips Bay, as well as a couple locations in the South Bronx and North Manhattan along the Harlem River. We don't know exactly which features cause those induced flooding impacts, at least the ones on the East River and Harlem River. We think the ones that are around Breezy Point are because the gate that's on the Jamaica Bay Inlet that's in that feature there in South Brooklyn and Queens. I should also point out that of the 50 miles of shoreline-based measures, about 22 miles of that is related to that feature that's in South Brooklyn and Queens. So by far that is the predominant shoreline-based feature, and that in all of these shoreline-based features and the induced flooding features, there's on the order of about 13 miles of features that have natural elements or aspects to them, fabricated or dune structures with reinforced seawalls embedded within them and things like that, flood walls with parks. So there are some natural elements, but going forward, one of the key things we'll be looking at is where can we incorporate more natural and nature-based features. A lot of those features really don't address the 1% flood event, but they do make for good additions to existing other elements. So this is a rendering that kind of shows what a storm surge barrier system might look like going into Jamaica Bay.
Bryce, I hate to ask you, is there any way we can get fast forward to the boardwalk? Because even though this is important, which it is, but I think the people here in Coney Island and Southern Brooklyn wants to hear more of the plans that you have for the boardwalk. Can we skip ahead to that?
Okay. All right, sure. This is kind of a detail showing where the features that we have going around in the Coney Island area. I'll show a little bit more in detail. There are features inside of Jamaica Bay, and the boardwalk there we have along Coney Island is an elevated promenade, and you can see a rendering there on the left-hand side of what that might look like. Just to go through, there are some features that are kind of tied with the operation of the storm surge gate within Jamaica Bay. I won't go into detail. There's a rendering of what a flood wall around Manhattan Beach might look like. These are what storm surge gates look like with auxiliary gates. So those are in Sheepshead Bay, Garrettson Creek, and the, not Garrettson Creek, I apologize, and the inlet to Jamaica Bay. There's a number of different type of features that we can put along shoreline areas. Along Coney Island, we have the elevated promenade that you saw in that one rendering. But there are also areas where we have seawalls, areas where we have flood walls, areas where we have levees, deployable gates where we have openings for vehicles or pedestrians. And then there are flood wall areas where we're going to have flood walls with park. So just covering the South Brooklyn stretch, we have levees, flood walls there along the Gravesend Bay, going down towards Coney Island Creek. There's a tide gate structure there, tying off of levees on the north side, seawall and flood wall going around Seagate, and then an elevated promenade there along the Coney Island Boardwalk, going over to a seawall, and then around Manhattan Beach, a flood wall, which was shown on that one rendering. And then coming around, this is kind of outside your area, but basically levees and flood walls going over to that storm surge barrier at the inlet. So that's the plan that we have. It's very preliminary, very conceptual. Just to talk about the study schedule, just in brief, well, first off, it's a tier 1 EIS, so there'll be a tier 2 EIS, or maybe several of them in that design phase. So there'll be additional opportunities for public feedback, not just the current public review period that we have now. And the tier 1 EIS basically uses existing information, so it's a very broad overview evaluation of all the features in all the different plans. All the information's on our website. If anybody has comments, they can email us at this address or write mail to us at these addresses. Our schedule, as I mentioned, we have the comment closing date now is March 31st, and the report, the study phase altogether is supposed to be done probably sometime in 2024. And that's it.
Right, thank you.
I'd like to go back to the words elevated boardwalk.
Yes, I think that's what we need to see.
I understand levees go down to the levee. I heard that before. But elevated boardwalk, tell me what that means and how you would do that. We have stores there. We have things going on underneath what would be there, because we've had trouble under the boardwalk with fires and all kinds of people living there. I mean, this is just something we need more info about.
Sure. There are a lot of design details left to be worked out, but the characterization that we have for the boardwalk area is an elevated promenade, which is basically just you have some type of wall. It could either be sheet pile or some type of flood wall on two sides filled with earth, typically. Now, in the Coney Island area, we have, let me get back to that rendering. You can see the rendering that we have there is more or less just, and this is just to give an idea of what the elevation would be for that 1% flood event, considering what the existing elevation of the current boardwalk is, what it's made of, how it's tied in to the dune structure, as well as the existing boardwalk there by the businesses. Those are all details that would be probably hashed out during our design phase years from now. This is a very conceptual preliminary outline of what we would be doing in that area.
Okay, before we continue answering questions, Ida and Jeff, or is it Ida, wants to do a very short presentation. So Ida.
I'll stop sharing.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay, Ida, you can put up your screen.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Can you see it?
No, nothing yet. Hit share.
Are you sharing?
I haven't seen nothing here.
Okay, let me get back to Zoom. I do not see. Now, what do? I just minimize this? You have to
next
give me
to
permission to share.
Next to chat, it says share screen. You should be able to pull that up where it says.
Okay, share screen.
Yes,
there we are. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Go ahead.
Can everybody see me and hear? See this
Yes.
and hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
There's been a lot of talk about what's going on the boardwalk. Prior to, we mentioned some of the pilot study sections were mentioned. We've heard a lot of people say, oh, they love the section that's been done by Brighton 15th Street by Oceana. It's beautiful. They can walk. They don't have to worry about falling. I don't want to fall. Nobody wants to fall. But one of the questions we've been asking since before Hurricane Sandy is how a storm surge will or will not affect, how a concrete boardwalk will or will not affect storm surge impacts. And I've been dragging around this presentation since after Sandy. And Several months ago, I sent it to Bryce, and I also sent it to Anthony Ciora and Daniel Fall, who are the Army Corps of Engineers people, the project managers for our area. And I said to Dan and Anthony flat out, if you think there is nothing here with what I saw, with what happened here, I will drop this and not bring this up again. But they didn't tell me that. They told me to include this in the comments that my organization made on the harbor and tributaries, and I did. And one of the questions we need answered here by the Parks Department or whomever is, will concrete slabs with or without a plastic overlay make storm surge worse? Because unlike most of Rockaway, unlike Staten Island, our buildings are right on top of the boardwalk. So here's the concrete slab section that was put in about a little bit before Hurricane Sandy. You got the concrete, that's the lighter area. You have wood on either side. Here's Brighton First Road. Here is Beach Walk. Notice that there are two buildings here that are pretty much across from each other across Beach Walk. Okay, the impacts were so different. We saw, I took these pictures on November 4th, a few days after Sandy. There was a significant difference in impacts between the concrete section as compared to the wooden sections on either side of it. New York City Special Initiative for Rebuilding and Resiliency Report states that at Ocean Parkway, waves pushed thousands of tons of sand northward, with water traveling 1.5 miles north to Avenue W. But here's what happened down here. There was erosion under the concrete sections, but none under the wood. The sand was piled up by the storm surge to the level of the boards. I'm going to show you this. And several inches of sand accumulated on top of the wooden boards. Now, science is all about observation and asking questions. So the question here is, did this wooden surface somehow slow down this storm surge so that, and as evidence, the sand settled out? Where you had a wooden section and you went into the street, there was minimal sand, inches. Now, when you looked at the concrete, which was in between these wooden sections, there wasn't a drop of sand on top of the concrete. But in the street next to the concrete section, there was 8-10 feet of sand. And when you looked at the flooding in the buildings, remember I showed you those two buildings? In the building on Ocean Parkway, which was near the concrete section, they had about 15 feet of floodwater in their building. In the building, our building, that was just across Beach Walk, from that building, we only had a few feet of flooding. So let's look at what happened. Okay, here's where the concrete section ends, okay? Here you have a little wooden staircase. Notice that you have all of this erosion under the concrete, because before this, the sand came up to the concrete, okay? Here we are, we're at the same section, but before we look to the east, now we look to the west. This is the shade pavilion that extends out onto the sand. And you see here underneath that concrete section, there was significant erosion. Now, remember that before this, before Hurricane Sandy, this sand came all the ways up to the level of that boardwalk. And curiously, just at the exact point where the wood begins, where the concrete ends and the wood begins, the erosion stops, right at that exact point. Okay, here it is close up. At that exact point, the erosion stops underneath the boardwalk. Here's the top of the concrete section, clean as a whistle, no sand. And here I've stepped a few feet further back. Here you've got the wood ends right here, and here's all this sand on top of the boardwalk. But just a few feet away, there wasn't a drop of sand on top of the concrete. Why? Something happened here. This is on the street adjacent to the concrete section. This is Ocean Parkway. You can see some of the sand here has already been piled up. We had, I don't know, 8-10 feet of sand. This is the rear of that building on Ocean Parkway. This is their garage. The cars were buried. The sand is piled up in Beach Walk. Here's a closer look. And here's the people walking down Beach Walk in all of these sand piles. So the bottom line is that something different happened when that storm surge hit the concrete section versus when it hit the wooden sections on either side of it. And, I'm not an engineer here, but, Bryce alluded to this a little bit, when you have that flood wall coming in, it sort of deflects the wave energy to either side. And that's why they also have to harden the shoreline on either side of the floodgate. So again, these are just observations, but something very, very different happened here. And let's just take a look at what happened where they had concrete slab sections in Rockaway. Now here they didn't have the pretty plastic on top. Those concrete sections broke up. These become multi-ton battering rams, but there's no buildings here. Here's another section on top of the Rockaway boardwalk. Notice that you've got a wide vegetated area, you got a multi-lane roadway, and then your buildings begin. So and here's a little bitty piece of the wooden boardwalk here. Look at that. I didn't notice this before. The wooden boardwalk here looks pretty good. And yet these concrete sections are lifted up like dominoes. Okay, so the bottom line here is that nobody wants to fall. Nobody wants to break a neck, break their leg. But this is not about what's pretty and shiny and new. We have buildings that are right on top of the boardwalk. And so far, to my knowledge, the Parks Department has refused to even consider whether changing the boardwalk from wood to concrete slab with anything on top of it, fake wood, plastic, whatever, is going to impact our storm surges here. And why am I bringing this up tonight? Well, last night I was at an event where the city council speaker got up and said in Women's History Month, she was going to talk about Shirley Chisholm. And Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring your own folding chair. Well, I think we're bringing our own folding chair because I have tremendous respect for the Army Corps of Engineers. They can do things that nobody else can. They say that they're in communication with the Parks Department. And I'm sure the Parks Department is in communication with the Army Corps. But everybody needs to be in communication with the community board, with the neighborhood, with the people who live here, so that we're aware of what's going on. And so that we have a say in some of these things before they become fact. And that's it. And by the way, heat islands, Rebuild by Design, which is part of, I think, New York Rising, had a day-long seminar on the Army Corps of Engineers, harbor and tributaries, that whole program that Bryce showed you. And the first thing they had was a presentation about heat islands. And they said that concrete and synthetic materials create heat islands. So if they put down, so if you're going to put down artificial surfaces on a 3-mile long boardwalk, you're giving us a 3-mile long heat island. And has anybody thought how this is going to impact the energy costs of the people who live there and our little shoreline microclimate? So that's it, Eddie. You can take me off.
No, that's okay.
That's
all right.
enough.
All right. Well, Jeff, you can run this section, or Barbara, do you want to run this section of the meeting? I think Jeff can handle this part. All right, Jeff. It's all yours.
Okay.
Stop share. Okay, we stopped.
Okay, I would open it up to questions from the Zoom.
Yes, we have Abby.
And have questions for the Army Corps or Ida.
Or Parks.
Or Parks.
Okay.
Wrap it all together in a nice package.
Okay, Abby.
Hi, Bryce. Just wanted to ask if the feasibility studies has taken into account the living breakwaters measure that the New York State Office of Resiliency is currently working on with BOP, just like as an ecosystem engineering measure. Living Breakwaters is creating artificial oyster reefs off the coast of Staten Island to help dissipate storm surge power as it hits the coast. In reading the plans for the Harbor Estuary study for us, I was hoping to see something like that proposed for the waters off Coney Island and Brighton Beach and Manhattan, because that would be a tremendous, tremendous investment for long-term coastal resiliency. So please consider expanding Living Breakwaters and having that be part of the EIS for Coney, Brighton, and Manhattan. And the second is the continued renewal of beach grass and dunes for the ocean facing side. The parks has been great at helping to build up the dunes on Coney Island Creek and Kaiser. We know residents don't necessarily like it, but long-term it is creating a resilient storm surge natural barrier for future flooding events. The ocean side of Coney, Brighton, and Manhattan can also benefit from that. And we saw in one of the renderings, the elevated full promenade had beach grass and sand dunes associated with it on the ocean side. If we could just ask what needs to be done to really confirm that that can continue in the eventual actual building of it, just making sure that sand dunes becomes a part of it, because there are multiple states, New Jersey, North Carolina, who have invested in creating sand dune systems and have seen the benefits in making their coastal communities truly resilient.
Sure. There are a lot of areas where we can incorporate a lot of natural and nature-based features along the lines of both of those things that you just talked about, the dunes in front of the elevated promenade, as well as the living breakwater type structures to help reduce the wave energy coming into shore. Those typically work best for more frequent type storm events because they're more, the storm surge kind of can wash over them a bit from the more severe storms. So that's an area where we look to focus on heavily as the study advances, is how do we add those? So I mentioned earlier that what we have is kind of a framework plan. Maybe some of the bigger pieces are in place, but there are a lot of smaller areas or components like that we need to add into it to make a complete plan. So thank you for that comment. It's great suggestions. Really do look to try to incorporate those as we go through not just the study, but then of course the design phase in far greater detail then too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Chris, Greg, and then Ida with us, Jeff. But go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank for the presentation. Ida does a great presentation on it because, in this community, we need to also worry about the safety of seniors and people with disability. And the one thing I did not see, and Marty, I hope I'm seeing more updates when you come to the meetings, please. Making sure the safety of the boardwalk for seniors and people with disability who would like to walk on the boardwalk, and make sure safety is the strongest, because I don't want to see people flying from the boardwalk, tripping on a boardwalk and flying in the air. I hope they land on the sand because that is soft, but they will get really hurt. And the one thing that we got to work on is if projects are going to be done, we do need these updates, because the number one thing is promises are made, and we got to make sure that people who are coming down to Coney Island, Brighton Beach, may want to go to Manhattan Beach just to have a little fun. They want to walk on a boardwalk to have fun with their family. And regarding projects, Atlantic City does keep their boardwalk up to date too. Because in studies, I know Ira can back me up because I always see her shaking her head, definitely backing me up. If they see a damage, it's like saying the same thing on MTA. If you see something, say something. You put it into 311. Does it go through? No. The person who actually can answer faster is Community Board 13 or the elected officials, because we need to have the safety of any person. So can we please work on communication for any person? And I'm saying this for seniors and people with disability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Craig, and then Ida.
Thanks, Eddie. So I want to piggyback on what Chris was actually just talking about. I have a question for you, Bryce. I'm admittedly a bit fatigued as far as the substance of the HATS plan goes. 569 pages, a dozen appendices. You know, it's not a light read. And spending a couple of weeks on it. I don't know how you do it, Bryce, because you're there 24/7 doing this. I'd like to talk not about the substance of the plan, but about the process. And
Sure.
based on what Chris said, what options, there's 9 subregions in this. This is 900 miles of coastline in New York and New Jersey. 16 million people are impacted, and it's got a potential $53 billion price tag attached to it. And now we're going this is just the tier 1 stuff. We'll be going into 6 years of tier 2 type stuff and planning and design and all of that. This is way too ambitious and huge to handle as one project. So what options do we have to break this down so that there's much more local community engagement, but not just when you hit milestones, in an ongoing way? Because we need to have that seat at the table. I want Ida's folding chair for myself. I'll bring a few for my friends and neighbors as well. We need that seat at the table, not just when there's milestones, but all of the points in between as well. So what kind of flexibility do we have for that kind of process moving forward, Bryce?
That's actually a question that we have to discuss with our higher authority offices, is how do we started a really good dialogue with the public outreach that we have on this report now, and we don't want to, you know, we might have to take a few months just to digest all the feedback that we get, but we do want to, once we start resuming the study work proper, figure out mechanisms where we can start having continued dialogue going forward in the study, because you know, the core typically has our milestones, our outreach, and then we do our study work off in a, you know, cave somewhere, and everybody has radio silence. So how we can keep a dialogue going forward. Now, when the study is over, you know, all that ends up is a recommendation to Congress. They can decide to give us authorization to proceed or not. They can give us funding to proceed or not. The non-federal sponsors at any point can stop their sponsorship. But if we get so lucky as to get through all of that and into the design phase, there are, in our current plan, and I don't know that, you know, we'll be going, you know, forward with the current plan, a hybrid plan, locally preferred plan, everything's up in the air kind of thing. But I would see each of these features that we have in our current plan, or whatever plan gets put forward, kind of having its own little focused team working on the design and the tier 1 EIS. So the granularity or the detail that we'll have and the amount of engagement that we'll be able to do will only increase as we go along. We've had to kind of focus on these big scale alternatives because they're so dramatically different from each other, and it covers such a that huge vast area that you just described. But now that we kind of have honed in on what we think might be the workable solution for it, and based on what feedback we get from the city and the 2 states, as well as, you know, discussion with our higher authority offices, hopefully we can kind of craft a plan forward that incorporates greater opportunities for that engagement through the process, so that people at least know what we're working on, and, you know, when the next really key time period will be for getting their feedback. And, you know, we have to, you know, it's like any study team, like the commissioner was mentioning earlier, you know, there's a time when we have to like dig into the details and kind of go through the evaluations, the design work, environmental evaluation work, where we have something presentable for the public. This is a great opportunity now, but we need to figure out how to have more of those going forward, not just the tier 2 EIS.
Thanks, Bryce. You know, I found that working on the Gowanus Canal Superfund with the EPA, having a community advisory group that met regularly with the agencies, was a great way to sort of stay engaged and involved. Everybody had a seat at the table. There were minutes, there was information, there was a lot of information sharing, and everybody knew what was going on every step of the way. So, if there's room for consideration for something like that, or some other form of engagement, and we need to help you convince your higher ups of that, would you give us a little clue as to what we might be able to do to help give this the push that it needs?
Well, writing us comments right now saying we want to be engaged throughout the rest of the study and through the design phase, not just when you have a draft document to review. That would be a good comment.
That would be a good comment.
That's what you're saying.
Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to also add something that this is very, very complicated. And even though you show us this, it needs to be made simpler.
Yeah.
So you could, it's so much, it's so complicated, it's very difficult to digest. So if you could think of a way to make it simpler, steps, something, so that it would be easier for everyone to understand. I think that.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a good suggestion to make it simpler for people, everyday people, to understand what's being proposed.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Next we have, is it Ida or is it Jeff? Or both?
Ida, and three things very fast. Regarding boardwalk repairs, this is a section of scaffolding, you can't really see it, that was put down over the roof next to over the driveway of the Brighton Beach Library a few weeks ago. It's about 150 feet by 30 feet, and two guys banged in a whole bunch of boards over that whole thing in 2 hours. So, I mean, it can be done. That's number one. Number two, we don't want to see the Parks Department spend taxpayer money. We know the boardwalk needs repairs. We know we got to fix up 22nd Street. We know it's a mess. But we don't want to see the Parks Department spend millions of taxpayer dollars doing repairs, and then the Army Corps of Engineers comes by a few years later and says, oh, we got to rip this all up. This doesn't fit our design. It's no good. That's another reason why you guys got to be in conversation with each other and with the community so we know what's going on. So taxpayer money is not wasted. Last but not least, I want to piggyback on what Abby said. Messages in the sand from Hurricane Sandy. This is a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers feature story from September 7th, 2016. And it basically talks about how communities that had vegetated sand dunes had far less hurricane damage than communities that did not have hurricane sand dunes. And this is something we've been asking the Parks Department about for years too. The Army Corps of Engineers project is going to take years before it's built. Years. And the hurricane season is coming here June 30th, and it's going to be here June 30th every year between now. The ocean's not waiting. And meanwhile, we're sitting ducks. And all you need to make dunes is a bulldozer and a bunch of volunteers, because even though I've done it, to stick the stems of the grass in the sand. So my question to the Parks Department is, you got dunes in Rockaway, you got dunes in Staten Island, okay? The Army Corps of Engineers made Fire Island all dunes, okay? I mean, it's not perfect. Do they still flood? Yeah, but at least it's something. So why on earth do we have to be sitting ducks here for years and not have sand dunes? Can someone please explain this, because I'd like to know?
Thank you, Ida.
All right. I don't know. Marty, if you want to.
Excuse me. Does anyone have an answer to the question? That's what I don't hear an answer.
Why doesn't Marty have an answer?
I don't have an answer. As I understood it, when the Corps did the 93, 94 replenishment of the sand, that was the dune protection. That was the case in Sandy. Though we did get sand infiltration and the water and so on. From what I was told from the Corps, that the sand nourishment did its job, and they replenished that sand that was lost with immediately after Sandy. We've done things to, and by the way, somebody mentioned we created dunes on the north side. That is not the case. God created those. We're just trying to stabilize them with beach grass. And we have done some selective beach grass planting to stabilize in areas where we thought it would survive on the beach, both on the west side and just in front of the aquarium.
Oh, Marty, I've asked about beach dunes for years, and this is the answers I get. Oh, we can't get dunes because if we get dunes, then piping plovers are going to nest, and if piping plovers nest, we're going to have to close off sections of the beach. To which I answer, no self-respecting piping plover is going to nest here because we have too many dogs all over the place, and birds view dogs as predators. Number one. The other excuse I've been getting is, oh, no, we can't have sand dunes because if we have sand dunes, then we can't use the mechanical rake to rake the trash out of them, and we got to use manpower, and we don't have enough manpower. So now, but meanwhile, you managed to have dunes in front of the aquarium.
Yep.
It looks very pretty for them. Okay, and down on the west, it's near the West End, near what's-his-face's luxury condos there. So we know, so Bryce, I'm asking you, you're a wonderful man. I know that you're so resourceful. Maybe so we don't drown here between the time your project gets going, maybe you could somehow work out something, because and I have here also you're doing your 92 project here. Here's all of it, okay? And the 92 project, okay, that you piled up the sand was supposed to last us something like 200 years. And 20 years later, I watched the water come over the 200-year project and roll down my block. So maybe the two of you could get together and figure out a way to get a bulldozer and some plants. So at least we're not sitting ducks until the better solution comes along. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Did you want me to finish? No.
Yes,
Never mind.
Yes,
Never mind.
Marty. Let Marty finish, please.
Never mind.
No, but
No,
sir,
Marty's always
just add
finished.
park stewardship really does a good job at getting outreach to our schools and community to come out to these events to plant the seagrass. So the manpower is there. If you make the events, the community folks will come out to plant the seagrass and to help build those dunes. But you need the higher levels, the administration, you as the commissioner, to put that as a priority, to tell stewardship, I see what you're doing. It's making an impact. Here's more money. Keep doing more. That's all that needs to happen. And that's something that you cannot do within this year with your power as commissioner, sir. And I know you find it funny, but as the folks who are in the sand, planting the beach grass and seeing the difference, we're trying to tell you, just say yes to something that's actually working.
Now, could I speak?
Yes, okay, Gloria.
Thank you. Now, I almost forgot what I was going to say.
I'm
glad the Parks Department is on here. It's going to take something, I hate to say it, for a disaster to happen for the boardwalk in Coney Island to get it together. I don't know why we are being attacked at the same time with MTA, the casino, which I haven't been able to meet none of those meetings. But what I'm trying to say is that when the casino comes, I bet you they're going to try to fix the boardwalk up there if it comes. All of this stuff been planning for the last 40 years. And we still saying the same thing over and over and over like a broken record. It's time to shit and get off the pot. Either you're going to fix it or you're not. This thing been going in the circus, giving me a headache. The other thing is with the Parks Department on the other side of the peninsula, the sand keep coming up back there by Bayview, outside Seagate, between 37th Street and 33rd Street, going towards Kaiser Park. I am sick and tired of listening to the same things over and over again. I had watched and babysitted that boardwalk for 53 years. I saw them repaired. I saw them fix it. It could have been the end of the 70s going into the 80s. We got new residents out there that don't understand what's going on. And We need to get it together. That's all I have to say.
Okay. All right. Just for other speakers, if you could refrain from cursing, it'll be nice.
Well, you know, they curse on TV
I
and
know,
they
but we're
beat them
not on
out. But
TV.
you know,
This is
I
being
just get
recorded.
upset. I'm sorry about that. I did not curse at anybody. I'm
Right.
just cursing at the whole topic
You
of
got it.
everything not being done in Coney Island.
Thank
So
you
I
very
want to
much.
correct that with you, Eddie.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, baby. I mean, not you. I'm not calling you baby. I'm talking to the dog.
Okay, thanks. Angela?
Hi, everyone. First, I want to address Abby about dunes and beach grass. So we have a group called Friends of Us at Levy Park, and this year we're requesting to give us a chance to plant beach grass. So let's get in touch because we need people. If we have the more people, the more volunteers we have, the more beach grass we can plant this year. And that will be fantastic. I'm all for dunes. I want to say a few words about the discrepancy between a presentation of the Army Corps of Elevated Boardwalk and what we hear on the materials and usage. So elevated board, I understand it was a draft, but the rendering shows wooden boardwalk, which I love it. I think that's a great idea. I don't like elevated boardwalk, but I think we should have a wood. And if you decided to go for elevated boardwalk, it should be wood. Now, what we hear from Parks Department that we can't use wood. So in case if we have elevated boardwalk, what we're gonna have, we end up with 2 levels of concrete. I can't even imagine it. I don't know what is gonna be turned into that. So I think we should keep open-minded about the usage of wood. There are different types. You don't have to cut endangered tropical forest. There is recycling wood. You can find recycled wood. You can find sustainable, as somebody was saying, there is a forest that they farm. This wood is literally farmed for these cases like this to be used somewhere. And it brings economy to the areas that need this money. So it's doable. It's really doable. It's possible. Now, what is the hurdle is the use of the boardwalk, because universally boardwalk used to walk on it, not to drive on it. Once you start driving cars and vehicles, that's when the planks can sustain the weight. And that's why you need to go to concrete. So we have to choose what we want to have. We want to have a nice wood boardwalk, or we would like to have a sidewalk or a little driveway or elevated driveway or 2-level driveway. And it's very important for the community that I think the conversation with community is must happens before we go in and decide, yes, it's going to be concrete. Yes, it's going to be elevated. Yes, it's going to be plastic on top. I just can't imagine it. So the whole idea of Coney Island will disappear. Then I want to also emphasize the heat zones, very important. The Coney Island Peninsula doesn't have enough vegetation. I think we have like below 9% of coverage to compare. Midwood has 25. That's when you see the nice trees that cover in the street, that's 25%, with 8%. So that's why we have asthmatic kids. That's why we have more cases with asthma as it is right now. Once you added more concrete, you have a heat zone, you have more cases of ambulance. Let's face it, 34% of our population are people 65 years or older. So heat islands is a big, big deal for us. That's all. I just want to say, let's keep talking. Let's look for the possibilities. I'm sure there is a way to find the solution to everything. And I'm all for planting grass. Abby, let's get in touch, please.
All right. Thank you, Angela. Next we have is Minnie and then Sergey.
My question is for Bryce. Your presentation was extremely complicated. This was the first time I saw it. My question is, can you have any kind of a pilot project where you can break down the different solutions and actually implement it and see how it plays out? And just concerning what the last speaker said about the trucks going on the boardwalk, there's a carriage lane that they're not supposed to go on, and I always see them on this carriage lane. Maybe we should at least talk to sanitation and the police department not to drive their huge trucks on the carriage lane. Thank you.
Okay, next we have is Sergey.
Hi, I have two questions. One for Marty Moore. Is he still here?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Marty. So, sorry, I was a little bit late. Technical difficulties. I still didn't hear in very plain, short terms. What happened with $114 million that the previous Councilman Mark Traeger secured for the boardwalk?
I did explain that earlier. I'm sorry you missed it. We have, it sounds like a lot of money. It is not going to do the entire boardwalk. We have engaged a consultant to do some technical studies and engineering and condition assessment, so that can inform our designers and engineers of how to best proceed with the boardwalk. But there's only funding for a first phase. So that money is there. A small portion of it's being spent on this study. That's going to take some time before we get into engineering and what we're going to do. When we do have that, like we do always, we will engage with the community board for that.
So entire $114 million will go into study, nothing for repairs?
No, that's not what I said at all.
Can you
It's not what I said when you were late for the meeting. It's not what I just said. I said a small portion is going for the study and the balance will go for a phase one, but that's not enough to do the entire boardwalk. Parts of the study will determine how much it will cost to do the entire boardwalk. Also looking at buildings, also looking at accessibility, also looking at utilities, etc. You can't just look at the boardwalk alone. There's many, many utilities underneath it. It is not wheelchair accessible everywhere. We have to look at the lighting and the cable and the sewer and all the other things that go along with it.
Okay,
So
thank you.
a portion's being used for that study. That study will inform our designers and engineers. When we have something to bring to the community board to discuss, we will certainly engage with the community board.
Thank you. And I have a question for Bryce, if I may, Bryce. Moving forward, because Ida pointed out how important it would be not to bury hundreds upon hundreds of million dollars in the sand in the future, would it be possible to form like a working group between parks and Army Corps? And that's where Ida and Craig and some other folks can park their folding chairs and to use their knowledge and expertise and community impact to kind of be involved in future planning.
Sure. There are a lot of hurdles that we have to get past before we'll get into the design phase where we could do that kind of stuff. But you know, assuming that we get to a plan, we can make a recommendation to Congress. They give us authority, funding. We have non-federal sponsor support and get into the design phase. I would anticipate that we would have maybe follow along maybe the lines of what we had with like EPA has with the community advisory group, but some type of work group for the different areas where we have different key features like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have Chris.
Thank you.
All right, Chris.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, my microphone is jamming.
Okay.
I still didn't get my answer from Parks or from the court, because when I see you guys doing some of these plans, I still didn't get my straight answer of what you guys have been doing, what you're going to be planning, because part of some of these plannings you guys are discussing for the boardwalk or something like federal. I remember I was in a standing committee and they still even talk about accessibility. So I hope we can still continue talking about it. But also, Marty, I hope I can get an answer. Any new updates on regarding updating certain areas that have to be fixed in the community in CV 13? Are we still going to be getting some adjustment repairs? Because some of those areas I know Craig mentioned, Ida has mentioned, but at the same time, we need some of these areas needs to be maybe get some good repair work, because there are cracks in anywhere in the boardwalk, and there are safety concerns too. And as a person with a disability that sees, with my other hat coming in for OPWDD, we need to make sure that safety comes in for any individual who walks on the boardwalk, who are trying to even do some drawing or want to have a little fun at the aquarium, or go to the Coney Island rides, or maybe go to a cyclone game. We still need to work on the safety. And they did put the 311 complaint in, but nothing has responded back, as I said before. And Eddie and Community Board 13 has responded back, and I thank them always. So can I get an answer?
Chris, I mentioned before that the mayor made a large allocation for boardwalk lumber and for additional crews. Last fall, we started with four crews of carpenters and maintenance men. That will continue again beginning in April. We are in the process of procuring wood for that. The wood that we're allowed to buy, it's not that easy because there's they can't meet the demand that we have, but we're working that out. So yes, we're going to continue our maintenance on the boardwalk. We will get as much as we can. The real need is for a complete reconstruction. It hasn't had significant capital that it needs. It is 100 years old. There's 1.3 million boards, but accessibility is very important to us, and safety is very important to us. So we will continue to make the best efforts we can with these additional resources that we just got. Last fall was the first time that we've been able to have that many crews working on it, and you'll see more results of that in the coming months.
Thank you, Marty. Can you also please remind your staff, is that Chris? Because Chris does respond back to me. Chris, your accessibility part person does respond. But if any other staff are dealing with some of these issues, can you please, when they put the 311 complainants, can at least get back to them, at least not like 2 or 3 months, but at least a week or two? That's been a little complaints been coming on.
So you've been calling 311 and not getting responses?
Correct. It's not just me, it's my other fellow individuals.
Do you have a contact for James Cruikshank or Larry Major?
Larry, I've never heard of, but the other person I did not hear anything back. And I did check with Chris. Yeah.
Chris, do me a favor, give Eddie your contact info. Eddie, send it to me tomorrow. Definitely. And I'll make sure you get a call from the regional manager. You can reach out directly to him for any concerns you have.
All right, Chris.
Thank you, Marty.
Send it to me tomorrow. All right. Anything else? All right. Before we tie everything up, we have some elected official reps. Do you guys want to say anything? We have Chris, Erica, Gregory, Zanera. Does anyone of you guys want to say anything on behalf of your elected officials?
Regarding this, not at this time, no. Thank you.
Okay, all right. But bring back the information to him, okay?
Will do.
Okay, Gregory?
Yeah, no, just jump in for a minute. I mean, I learned a ton about the boardwalk today, probably more than I think I ever knew prior. But again, always a pleasure to be on. I really, I love tuning into these, especially as, representing a new assembly member. It's unbelievably invaluable to hear from the community. I think that, you guys have such a finger on the pulse of how this area has changed, the development, the lack of development over the past, even 30, 40 years going all the way back. So at least from my perspective, I sincerely appreciate hearing everybody's opinion on this, because it also helps me kind of formulate what to report back to the assembly member. So thank you all for sharing and for sticking on for so long.
All right, Chris and Zanera. You guys.
You're calling me
there?
Eddie?
No, not Chris. Sorry, the other Chris McCrae. All right, if not, let's go back to Jeff, Ida, or Barbara.
Well,
I would like to thank Marty and Bryce for coming
First.
and for answering and doing the best they can to make it clearer to us what's going on. Whenever you want, we'd love to have another meeting when you have some other things to add. And Sue, would you like to say anything else?
Actually, all I would like to say is thank you for coming and good night.
All right, and then Jeff, on your behalf of your committee.
1 minute, Eddie. We do old business.
Oh, yes.
Business. I know Fran has something to say.
Yes, Fran has
New
something.
old business, Fran?
The tennis court. Fran, you have to hit *6 to unmute.
I'd like to, yes, I'd like to ask Marty because I never get a chance. We were promised new windbreakers in Coney Island. There are none. They're all down. And also some of the tennis nets are damaged. We can use some fixing there.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
The windbreakers are all down and some of the tennis nets are corroded.
I know the windscreen was on order. There was a supply problem with that. I will relay that information to Larry tomorrow morning.
Okay, and there are some nets that are damaged, okay?
And I'm here,
Commissioner.
Okay.
I got the message.
Thank you,
Okay,
Larry.
thank you very much.
Larry, get
Thank
Chris's
you.
information also.
Will do.
Abby.
Is there any other old or new business?
Abby, you can unmute.
Just real quickly for the commissioner, again, like in reference to stewards, if you could please help get more events on the calendar. Your team at Stewards is absolutely amazing. These are folks who are really passionate about what they do and honestly are the people who are the face of parks for a lot of student community residents. If you could please help prioritize getting more events, especially beach grass planting events on stewardship calendar, whatever it takes, maybe some extra staff support or funding, we would appreciate it greatly.
Thank you very much. We like the Natural Resources Group as well.
Cool. All right. Anything else you guys want to say? Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, in closing, I just want to thank everybody for coming to this meeting. It's very informative. But I would also like, in fact, the comment period for the HATS project has been extended to March 31st, and I advise people to write in their comments, even if it's just about the get through the Coney Island Peninsula project. You don't have to read the 1,500 pages like Ida did. Now, also, I just want to say the council is now meeting on their budgeting, and I think people should write to their councilman or woman to get more money into the Parks Department so we can have people, instead of having 4 crews, to have maybe 20 crews to work on the parks rehabilitation project, or having more seagrass in the Parks Department. It's very important that we keep in touch with our council people. The squeaky gear gets the oil. So let's everybody start squeaking. Thank you.
All right. I guess that's it. All right, guys. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll.
Motion to close the meeting.
Yes. I guess everyone. Yes.
And a second.
Yes.
All in
second.
favor to close the meeting?
That's it.
Anyone opposed?
No one opposes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good night.
Marty. Thank you, Bryce. We appreciate your being here this evening.
Oh, and Bryce,
Thank
if you
you
can
for
send
being good
me,
partners.
Bryce, if you can send us PowerPoint of just that little section, that'd be great.
I'll send you the slide deck that we have.
Sounds good.
And
Thank
see
you,
if
guys.
you can make it more understandable to normal, regular people, okay?
Yes.
I'll try.
All right, if not, think of us as kindergarten and you're.
If not, you call me up and I'll translate it for you.
Okay.
You got any
Thanks,
problems, you call me up, I'll help you with it.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening, and thank you all for being present this evening. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Night.
Good night.